Hi, kindergarten. Today we're going to continue on into our unit, and today's lesson is called Colonies in Native American Lands. All right, our first word is colonies. That's areas of land where Native people are ruled by people from another country. So, just like how Columbus went into North America without knowing anything, a colony is when someone goes into a land that is not their own and then decides that they're going to rule it. It's not okay, and it often can be pretty hard for the people who already live there, in this case, Native Americans. Disappointed. Disappointed is feelings that something didn't work out the way you wanted it to. Like, he looks really sad here because it's when something just didn't go the way you wanted it to go. You might be disappointed if you don't get ice cream, something like that. Then we have explorers. Explorers are people who travel to unfamiliar places to find or learn something. So if you go somewhere new and you're trying to learn something, you're an explorer. Then we have religion. Religions are a set of shared beliefs, often involving the worship of a higher being that provides guidance for ways to live. So there are so many different religions, but you could think about Islam, Judaism, Christianity, Buddhism. Those are some examples of different religions. Then we have refused. Refused is declined to do something, so said no. Like if you refused to do your homework, it means you didn't do your homework. But you wouldn't do that, right? No, you wouldn't do that. Okay, so this is our world map that we're looking at. Now remember, Christopher Columbus left Spain and he went zoop, zoop, zoop all the way over here into the Bahamas. Christopher Columbus's voyages sparked interest in what Europeans believed was the newly discovered land. Many people from Europe were interested in America. Remember, they thought this was a new place. They didn't know that anyone had lived there before. They were very excited about it. In the next few read-alouds, it's going to take place more than 100 years after Christopher Columbus's first voyage. It's going to tell a story of a group of people called the Pilgrims who traveled from Europe all the way over to America for different reasons than Columbus did. Okay? Remember, Columbus died believing that he had reached the Indies. He still thought he was in Asia, but future explorers figured out that he was wrong. So over the next 100 years, European explorers learned a lot that Europeans had not previously learned. The more people learned, the more the map of the world changed. So remember, Christopher Columbus had a map that looked like this. It had Europe, it had Asia, it had Africa. It did not have any continents over here. This is our current map. This is what the map looks like today. Okay? See how these maps are different? This only has 3 continents, but you all know there are how many continents on the map? 7. So both of these maps show Asia. Both of these maps show Africa. Both of these maps show Europe. But there are a lot of different continents on our map now that weren't there before. And today's map looks a lot more like the maps that were there during the time of the Pilgrims. Okay? And in today's read aloud, we're going to be talking a lot about Europe right here. This is our timeline. So in the 1400s, Christopher Columbus came to North America, and over here in 2020, and now 2021, we have our Zoom classes all together. So there's a lot of time in between. But now we're going to move to 100 years later into the 1500s. Okay. Now, we are going to go ahead and start reading. Please remember that you're going to hear a story about a group of people called the Pilgrims. And the Pilgrims were not always called pilgrims. That's because the word pilgrim means someone who makes a very long journey far from home. When the story first begins, the Pilgrims hadn't left home, so they were not pilgrims yet. They were just people living in the country. But they were called Separatists. Can you say that word? Separatists. Listen really carefully to the read aloud to find out why the Separatists wanted to leave England. Remember, I'm going to show you one more time. England is over here in the United Kingdom in Europe, and they're going to go zoop all the way to North America. Okay, here we go. Do you remember which country's king and queen helped Columbus sail across the ocean from Europe? That's right, Spain. Christopher Columbus was one of the first explorers to visit what they called the New Worlds. Explorers traveled to unfamiliar places to find or learn something. But after Columbus's voyages, many other countries in Europe began sending their own explorers hoping to find gold and jewels. Their men sailed westward from France, Portugal, the Netherlands, and England. For the next 100 years, European explorers and their ships sailed back and forth across the Atlantic Ocean, exploring the continent of North America and updating their maps based on what they learned. They have to update their maps because remember, that map is not right. They need it to look more like this. They're coming from the United Kingdom, from Portugal, from France, from Spain. As time passed, the Europeans began to build colonies in America. Europeans began to settle in various places in America. Colonies are areas of land where native people are ruled by people from another country. Remember, it's never okay to go into someone else's land and decide that you are in charge. That's like if a stranger came into our classroom and said, guess what, they're the new principal, and we didn't have any choice about it. It's not okay. But that is what they did at this time. So, in this picture, what do you see? 3 ships, okay? These are 3 different ships heading to the first permanent English colony in America at Jamestown. Years before, Columbus tried to start a colony in Hispaniola by claiming that the land he came upon belonged to King Ferdinand and Queen Elizabeth. It did not belong to them. Now, 100 years later, other Europeans were doing the same exact thing. So in 1607, the English people started one of the first colonies in the New World. They named it Jamestown after their ruler, King James I. King James was well liked by the English people, but sometimes he used his power badly. As head of the Church of England, King James declared that everyone in his kingdom must share his religion or beliefs. They must all attend the Church of England, the King's Church, and pray as the king prayed. The English people had no choice. Do you think that this might have made some people unhappy if they had different beliefs than the king? The King of England is saying, guess what? If you're in my country, you have to have the same beliefs as me. Does not sound good. Now, most people in England followed the king's command, but there were some English people who did not. One group was known as the Separatists. The Separatists had their own beliefs about how to pray. They were disappointed with the king's church. Remember, they didn't like the king's church. So they formed their own church and began meeting in homes. If they stopped going to the king's church, were they breaking his rules? What do you think would happen to them? Well, when the Separatists refused to attend the Church of England, the king was furious. The Separatists said they would not go to the king's church on Sunday. If you miss the Sunday service, he told them, you must pay a fine. So they have to pay money if they miss church. And he said, if you continue to miss church services, I will command my soldiers to arrest you and throw you in jail. The word fine means to pay money as a form of punishment. You can imagine how upset the Separatists became. Imagine if someone told me if you didn't go to their particular church, that you would have to pay them money or go to jail. That doesn't seem fair. What if you have a different belief? So they lived in fear of being arrested and thrown in jail. One woman whispered to a friend, I think someone working for the king has been watching our house. Her friend looked around nervously to make sure that no one else was listening, and then said, my husband thinks someone has been following us in the streets to see if we're going to our own prayer meetings instead of going to church. Who knows which of us might be next? Life became harder and harder for the Separatists in England. Other people looked at them curiously, and they did not know what to do. So some people were nice to them, which made the Separatists very unhappy. Or some people were not nice to them at all, which made the Separatists really unhappy living in England. They heard that people in other countries were able to worship as they pleased. That means other people had a choice of what religion they wanted to practice. And so the decision was made to leave Europe behind. They would look for a way to reach North America. The Separatists were about to begin a pilgrimage, or a long journey, to this continent that was brand new to them. From here on, they would be known as the Pilgrims. It's a lot of information today. Go ahead and click on the exit ticket below and get ready to talk about this story with Mr. Malcolm.